Sciences Po in the CEVIPOF and Director of Political Studies at the College of Europe in Zürich. Welcome to this panel on the future of Europe. I will keep my presentation very short to give as much time as possible to our three guests. It's obviously a question that will be very central for the presidency of the country in the 6 months to come. Emmanuel Macron really wanted to achieve something on the topic when he was elected in 2017. We all remember the big discourse of the Sorbonne, of Athens, etc., etc., proposing a lot of things about that, but he found himself very alone when reflecting about concrete things to do. Also, the Conference on the Future of Europe was supposed to be a tool for him, with the idea that it would make its conclusion during the French presidency, maybe leading to the possibility of a new treaty, but then we have the COVID, conference is late 1 year, and it's not realistic to imagine having the conclusion of the conference during the presidency. Nevertheless, Macron can launch a reflection about the future of Europe, can propose a certain number of things, can put things on the table, because nobody is doing that. And there is a very good news for him is what is happening in Germany. The fact that the new government is very much interested in EU affairs, that EU affairs are very central to the coalition agreement with very precise proposal regarding the conference and some institutional changes. So I think it's a fascinating moment for us to think about the future of Europe. So we have today 3 speakers, an all-male panel. Sorry about that, but there was some consolation. And it was not supposed to be like that. Maybe it's not worth cancelling the panel. We have first here in the middle, Ivo Belet. He's a member of the cabinet of Dubravka, Šuica, who is the Vice President of the European Commission in charge of Democracy and Demography. We have on the left Schimmelfennig, who is Professor at the Center for Comparative and International Studies, ETH in Zürich, and who is also involved in TEPSA. And at my left, you have Donald Wertlen, coming from the IESIR, from the Comenius University of Bratislava, and who's also involved in TEPSA. What I propose is to start with a 10-minute statement of each of our guests, and then a discussion with the room. Mr. Belet, you come first.
Okay, we keep on, Olivier, we keep on the mouse, okay?
Yes. I don't know. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, that's clear. Good afternoon, all. Thanks very much for the invitation. I'll try to speak out as loudly and clearly as possible. You can hear me at the back of the room. It's fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So otherwise, give me, if my voice would weaken down, give me a sign. So thanks again on behalf of Vice President Šuica, who is Vice President of the European Commission, responsible for demography and democracy, which is a rather broad portfolio, and I shall say also an innovative portfolio, sort of pioneering portfolio. So on behalf of her, thanks very much for the invitation. Looking forward to the Q&A with you, and I won't be too long, so I will be rather brief in my introduction in order to give you the opportunity, of course, to come in with reactions and suggestions. Olivier already mentioned the fact that this invitation comes, or this event comes at the right timing. Not just because we are on the eve of the French presidency, which we are all looking forward to very much, but also because of and you already referred to it, the German Koalitionsvertrag, which has clear language, a clear paragraph on the Conference on the Future of Europe, and clear engagement from the new German government with regard to the future of Europe. So, which is, of course, how shall we say, strengthening, we hope so, the whole process. And last but not least, to mention that tomorrow morning, the European Citizens Panel, you know that under the framework, under the umbrella of the Conference on the Future of Europe, 4 European Citizens Panels are active, and one of them is gathering tomorrow morning in Florence, at the European University Institute in Florence. So we expect there to be, we don't know if all citizens will be there, but up to 200 citizens who have been, as you know, randomly selected a few months ago. They will gather in Florence together with, of course, the staff, the Common Secretariat of the conference, in order to have their third and more or less final session of that panel, in order to come up with concrete recommendations on the topic that they are dealing with in a few months, which is democracy. So future possible EU reforms, which is rule of law, and which is also security. So three big themes that this panel is dealing with, and so they have been working on it for now like 6 months, and tomorrow is their almost final session. Final, I mean, they will come with recommendations during the course of this weekend. Those citizens have engaged, have committed to come together the whole weekend, to engage, to invest their whole weekend in coming together and in the discussion, in the deliberation on these themes. That European Citizens Panel will start tomorrow morning with a plenary session, which will be web streamed. You can follow it on the website of the Conference on the Future of Europe. And then they will gather in, like, I don't know how much, 10 to 15 subgroups to deliberate and to come to recommendations on the specific sub-themes. And in the course of the Saturday and next Sunday, they will come with their final recommendations, which will then be sent to the plenary, which will hopefully, touch wood, will happen in next January and February. So, but you know that the previous panel had been, which should have taken place last weekend in Dublin, was delayed, was postponed because of COVID-19 circumstances. Okay. To make a long story short, allow me to say let me flag two particular innovations that we would like to highlight regarding the conference. First of all, as I said, is the fact of these panels. I already referred to the Florence panel, but we have 4 of these panels, consisting each of 200 randomly selected citizens. I think that we can say that it is, from a European point of view, innovative. The fact that these deliberative panels come together is happening not all over Europe, but in a lot of places in Europe. But having organized it as a European level at this scale, I think is new, is happening for the first time at the European level, bringing citizens in a deliberative process and involving citizens very closely with the European affair, or with the future of orientation of European policy. I think that is really an innovative exercise. We are learning every day, because we are convinced it hasn't happened before at this scale. So sometimes we criticize, but we're steering, and we are, as said, drawing lessons from each previous meeting. So it is very encouraging to have this diverse group of citizens. They're investing a lot of time, so often the whole weekend, in order to come together. But we are not surprised, but we are very stimulated by the fact that these deliberations among citizens are really high level. Those who thought that citizens don't know anything about the European Union, they are wrong. Citizens are very interested, and with the help of experts that we brought in, neutral experts, with the help of facilitators that steer the discussion. So we have until now very, very high level orientations that came out of the panels. You can read them all on the conference website. Everything, I think, is very transparent, and you can follow it immediately on the website of the conference of the Future of Europe. So one of the main, how shall I say, one of the main innovative, one of the most important innovative dimensions of the conference and of these panels is that the 3 institutions and the presidents of the 3 institutions, via the joint declaration that has been agreed upon half a year ago, the 3 institutions, Commission, Council and European Parliament, have agreed to, have committed themselves to follow up on the recommendations of the citizens. So this is not only a deliberative exercise among citizens, and the outcome of which will be put into a drawer, and a nice report put into the drawer, and then nothing will happen. On the contrary. So there is a clear commitment from the 3 institutions to follow up, and citizens civil society, members of the European Parliament, members of national parliament, all stakeholders involved will, without any doubt, remind the institutions of this engagement that they have done like a few months ago. So European citizens panels on the one hand, and the other hand also the plenary sessions where these citizens will come to, we already have had two plenary sessions. Other ones will come up in January and February, perhaps also in March, depending on the epidemiological situation. But those, the citizens who have been randomly selected of all these panels, 800 in total, will come together with elected representatives from the European Parliament, from the National Parliament, from civil society, from the Economic and Social Committee, and from the Committee of Regions, will come together in the plenaries and will decide on those final recommendations together, as we say, on a par or on an equal footing. So you have 108 citizens in the plenary, you have 108 members of national parliament, you have 108 members of European Parliament, so, and civil society on an equal level will come together and decide on those final recommendations that will come out, hopefully, we hope, we count on them in the upcoming months, January, February, March, perhaps also a little bit later, depends on the calendar, on the epidemiological situation, as I said, under the French presidency, and we are looking forward to, we hope, a final report, perhaps to be followed up later too, but a final report under the French presidency. It was indicated that it would be in March, but COVID-19 is not helping us. Perhaps it would be May, we don't know yet, but we hope to have a outcome under the French presidency, and that's also we have understood what the French presidency of the European Union will be aiming at. I promise to be short, perhaps one final element on communication and on awareness, because sometimes we as European Commission, but we are not the only organizer of this conference, but the conference as such is sometimes criticized because it is mentioned that that people are not sufficiently aware of what's happening in the conference, and that the public outside is not sufficiently aware. That is on the one hand true. On the other hand, we also have to indicate that the platform, the multilingual digital platform which I referred to, which is very accessible and has a low threshold. You just type in your iPhone Conference Future Europe and you're on the website. This has been done already by 4 million European citizens. 4.1 million, I checked this morning. 4.1 million citizens already went to the website. Is that a lot? I don't know. You can say this is 1 out of 100 European EU citizens, not European EU citizens. Of course, we have to do more. And that is exactly one of the reasons why we are here today. Yeah, because this is a young public. We have a young audience. We are talking about the future of Europe. We are talking about my future, your future, especially about the future of young people. We have to modulate the future of Europe. That's why also, and that's the final element that I will raise, young citizens, I mean citizens from 16 to 25 years old, are 1/3 of the plenary of that, and 1/3 of the panels, citizens panels. So 1/3 of the citizens participating are young citizens from 16 to 25 years old, which is extremely good, which gives a really fresh, how shall I say, dimension, creates a very fresh young biotope, and a very dynamic atmosphere within the conference. So those are the main elements that I wanted to raise, available also, of course, for further follow-up and for further questions and suggestions. Back to you, Olivier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Belet, for this very vivid and enthusiastic view on the conference on the future of Europe. I guess we are all surprised by what is going on. I've been involved very early with the private companies in charge of organizing the panels about how to set up that, and I was so skeptical about all the challenges that were around. I'm still skeptical when I consider the lack of attention of media for what is going on. But when you look at what is happening in the panels, I think this is pretty enthusiastic. And I think that the design has been very well managed in order to have something coming out of that, because it's by no way an easy exercise. I now give the floor to Frank Schimmelfennig, maybe for some consideration of the future, also considering the differentiated integration issue.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olivier. Yeah, so indeed I was asked to reflect on the issue of differentiated integration as one option for the future of Europe in the context of the ongoing conference. So why should we expect that differentiated integration should play a role there? Well, first of all, when the Commission published its white paper a couple of years ago, differentiated integration was one of the scenarios that it put forward for the future of Europe. And if I'm correct, this was actually the first time that a supranational institution of the European Union was explicit in formulating this as one of the options in which the European Union could develop further, thus deviating, let's say, from the paradigm, or some would say dogma, of uniform supranational harmonization in the European Union. The other reason why we would expect that is that indeed the French President has been a major driving force behind the conference, and in his landmark speeches he has also quite frankly talked about this as an option, that in order to move the European Union ahead, one should probably not, let's say, wait for the least willing member states, and that it would also be necessary to overcome the resistance of quite openly unwilling member states. So, I mean, there was some expectation on my side, at least, that this would play some role in the conference on the future of Europe. So, I was one of the 4 million people who checked the website on this issue, and so I did it again yesterday on the train, and what I found is, well, it's just a non-issue. Yeah. So my search revealed, okay, it's not one of the major topics. That's fine. There are not more than 4 ideas that you can search for that are even remotely related to the idea of differentiated integration. It doesn't feature at all in the interim reports that have been produced so far. And even these 4 ideas that have been put forward, they generated, let's say, very little discussion or support so far. So, in the conference, this seems to be an absolute niche topic. So I could actually stop my talk here. I want to use the rest of the time to talk a little bit about why this might be the case. Yeah? So why this is. So I think one issue is, of course, differentiated integration. It's a concept and a topic that academics are quite fond of, but if you put it without further explanation to the people, they have a very hard time relating to and understanding what this actually means. I mean, in the context of our research project, generously funded by the Commission, we have done some public opinion polls where we found, well, if you explain to people what this means, that it could mean opt-outs or transitional arrangements, there's actually broad general support for the idea of, and people also have some kind of structured beliefs. So but it's definitely not anything that really keeps, say, citizens busy, thinking about. The second point is that the topics of the conference are, I mean, they are discussed as broad reforms for the entire European Union. So they are discussed as common, uniform policies that the EU should engage in. But the way that differentiated integration is used in the European Union will probably only come up in a next stage, if there is any, because the European Union uses differentiated integration not as a strategy but as a remedy, it uses it as a remedy whenever there is a lack of consensus or you need to overcome veto threats by individual member states. So whether or not the conference on the future of Europe will in any way have an impact on the differentiated integration of the Union will depend very much on, let's say, what the institutional follow-up process will be. Yeah? And this is, of course, a very open issue. I mean, it has been made very clear from the beginning that this is not an intergovernmental conference and that it has no binding effect on the member states whatsoever. So it's completely in the hand of the member states in the end what they want to do with it, if it is to turn into a treaty change. And I think this is when issues of differentiated integration come up, not so much, let's say, at the strategic level or at the level of deliberation, when you think about what the EU should do, where it should go, in which way it should reform. So it's still early days, but I think we can still say that as a strategic option for the European Union, as which it was presented by the European Commission in 2017, this is really not part of the debate. And I also think for very good reasons, and that's going to be my last set of comments, because I think that the issues that the European Union is facing currently actually do not really lend themselves well to differentiated integration at all. So in the research that we have done, we've also looked quite intensely at, okay, where does differentiated integration work? Where is it helpful? Where does it facilitate European integration? And what are the domains, the areas, the circumstances under which it doesn't work? And what we find is indeed differentiated integration has played an enormous role in the 1990s, 2000s in order to facilitate European integration. Without DI, we would not have the Euro or Schengen. Yeah, so it's been a facilitator whenever the European Union or members of the European Union wanted to move ahead with new policy areas that have not been institutionalized yet, or when it was about the integration of new member states where say transitional arrangements facilitated the negotiations and the decisions on new member states. But there are two sets of issues where differentiated integration is not helpful. One set of issue is constitutional issues, and the other set of issues is redistributive issues, so issues of say sharing and solidarity. And I mean, if you look at the topics that are being discussed in the conference, most of the issues that are being discussed are either constitutional or have to do something with sharing and redistribution, or say solidarity within the European Union. So I mean, one of the main issues that were flagged very early was, for instance, the issue of transnational lists for parliamentary elections. It was the lead candidate system. It was QMV in foreign policy. This kind of issues. Okay, differentiated integration just doesn't make sense. I mean, you cannot have differentiated integration for how members of the parliament are elected, how you make decisions. So all of these institutional issues just don't lend themselves to this instrument of facilitating European decision making. And also when you think about the rule of law, values, rights, which is a major issue, of course, in the conference, it would be self-defeating, yeah, and it would not match, let's say, the constitutional values of the European Union to say, okay, some member states can opt out of the rule of law, or some member states can opt out of democracy. So these are issues that are just not, that just do not fit this instrument. And then when it comes to redistribution, I mean, this started with the reform of the Eurozone. It was a major issue in the migration crisis, of course. So issues of solidarity, burden sharing. Yeah, so that has really been, I think, one of the main challenges in the European Union recently. And these are also, let's say, core topics of the conference. And one can add climate change, health, yeah, which in the end also boil down to some kind of burden sharing and solidarity within the European Union. Now here, what would differentiation do if you introduced it to those issues? Yeah, it would basically mean that those that have low risks, low burdens, yeah, would opt out of European integration. So I mean, if you think about the European Union as some kind of an insurance system, yeah, of course we know that an insurance system only works if you bundle risks and if you bundle capacities, and that the welfare state works because everyone is in the system and you cannot opt out of it easily, with a grain of salt. And so differentiated integration would also not work in those issue areas where the essence of the policy is burden sharing. And we've actually seen that as a reaction to the COVID pandemic with the recovery fund, which is uniform integration. I mean, there has been a lot of bargaining, but in the end, all member states are part of it, and this is how it has to be if it is supposed to work. So I'll basically stop there. Summarizing, well, it's really not a big issue in the conference. We don't see much discussion of differentiated integration, but I would say this is for a good reason, yeah, because this is really not the fitting instrument for dealing with the current issues that the conference is tackling. And for that reason, even though I've spent a few years doing research on differentiated integration, this is nothing I deplore that this is missing in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank, for addressing the issue of differentiated integration. It's a strange animal because it's, when you look at the EU, it's everywhere, but when you open a treaty, it's nowhere. And when you think about the future of Europe, it's in everybody's mind, but nobody talks about it. Or maybe people talk about it at national level. Currently in France, with electoral campaign for presidential election, we see all sorts of candidates proposing to remove France for this politician, this one and this one. So maybe it will come back by the national channel. I now turn to Donald Wertlen from University of Bratislava for his first statement, and we'll open the discussion with you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thanks very much for the invitations. 3 days ago, I wouldn't even imagine sitting here with the distinguished guests, so thank you for having me. In my introductory speech, I will reflect on two aspects that are related to this panel. First, the conference of the Europe as such in the context of the Slovak Republic, and then follow up to the future of the integration within the European Union, also in context with the differentiation and differentiated integration that Frank has mentioned. So, as Olivier already mentioned, there has been told that there's little attention, media exposure to the conference of Europe, particularly in the Central European countries or the G4 countries. That would really like to promote, particularly in this geographical part of the European Union, the EU and the concept of the deliberation, of deliberative democracy, the participatory democracy. And in Slovakia, it is one of the points that has been criticized. The format, the organization of idea of this bottom-up approach and this participatory democracy was a bit neglected, as there's been a focus on the elites and the expert groups that were set up and to somehow steer these conference events that happened in Slovakia. One in 2021, one will be in January 2022, particularly organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs together with the Slovak Foreign Policy Association, non-governmental organization. And one of the arguments that has been stated is to use this platform more to engage the Slovak citizens into European policy making and raise awareness about the European issue in the Slovak Republic, given the fact that in the turnouts to the European Parliament election, it went between the 13% to maximum 20%, averaging 80% of the turnout to the European election in Slovak Republic. So working somehow with the disengagement of the Slovak public from the European issues, that was the format that was preceded in order to go on with the conference on the future of the Union. And two of the topics I would say that resonated, and for me that resonated in the discussion, or at least one major that already took place, was the Schengen. And the Schengen in the context of the challenges that the EU has been facing, the COVID-19 crisis, the migration crisis, or the Brexit. And this was primarily the connotation of the preservance of the freedom of movement that already, or the Slovak citizens already get accustomed to within the Schengen Zone. That is, as Fran mentioned, as such, one of the modes or one of the regimes of the differentiation within the EU, and whether some of these restrictions opened the idea of some disintegration within this bloc that has been already mentioned. The second, and I would elaborate a bit more, was the recovery plan within as a response to the COVID pandemic and within the implications for the future of Europe. As it's been stated, there has been the allocation of this 700 billion, more than 700 billion in the next Generation EU fund for this repair of the damages that the COVID constituted in the economies of the European countries. And one may argue that it's also an opportunity for further integration on the European level. The point is that the recovery funds and their allocation is also connected and closely associated with the European Commission assessment of this, and it's on basis on the national recovery and resilience plans that the member states had to prepare and submit it to the Commission. And the question, or the important question here is, or the important point is how to remain that the European Commission's recommendations toward those plans that were submitted by the member states will be relevant directly to the outcome of pandemics and would not go beyond what is necessary in order to really overcome these imminent issues that stem from the COVID's impact on the economies. There have been also 6 priorities that we categorized, for example, like green transition, the digitalizations, or health and education, that were the priorities in which the money should be allocated and should be spent. But there is this argument, or this question whether we can consider this event, this opportunity of the recovery from the COVID pandemic, as this milestone in the road towards the deeper integration, to consider it and somehow the critical junction that when we are, or member states are occupied with this shorter-term concerns, these are the impacts of the pandemic, that these will decisions taken now to participate and to provide these reforms that are connected to the allocation of the money, will then lead, or walking them to the path to changing the EU institutional design more towards the integration. So perceiving the recovery as the push for further integration in the European Union. And the second point is, and it's more like with a question mark, is in context of this Commission assessment and the reforms that some of them the countries maybe wouldn't pursue, it wouldn't be in the context these were like two major points that were discussed also in Slovakia, and how the conference on Slovak was going so far, and we'll still see how will the January event outcome. Nevertheless, the second point of speech of my introduction would be directly related to the one aspect of the future of Europe that has been, or one topic, and the climate and the climate change mitigation. I would add. It's one of the priorities of the European Commission or European Union as such. It's top of the agenda in alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and in the connotation of the rhetoric commitment of all member states. Moreover, the young generation really perceive the climate change as this imminent threat, and therefore also on their agenda it's one of the top spots. So this also translated into some Green Deal objectives that's been implemented in the recovery plan. For example, the percentage of the allocation of the money that should go to the green transition of the economy, and so on. So in an ideal scenario, the climate objectives in these various policy sectors would result in more homogeneous and harmonized policies in the European Union. But however, focusing on in this time, I would start with one policy sector that has been influenced and impacted by this, is the energy sector, where we can still talk about there's some fragmentation and renationalization pressures that particularly stem from the dichotomy, on one hand the sustainability and the renewable energy sources perceived as also economic opportunity and energy security opportunity. On the other hand, the fossil fuel still representing the secure and affordable option, and on the contrary, the renewable energy sources being perceived as more volatile and expensive. So it also opens where we can talk about in this scenario sort of multi-speed energy transition, citing that there have been calls for protecting environment but not placing greater burden on some member states, the Commission being more and more assertive with increasing ambitious energy and climate targets that are still in the framework of the treaty system, which really guarantees the freedom of the member states to determine their energy mix. And that's why I will just raise not the controversial point of this multi-speed transition, where there is this clear path dependence of some countries, particularly the Central and Eastern European countries, where the shift to renewable sources is much more cost, not only financial but also infrastructural and maybe some cultural point of view. And in this case, considering some kind of differentiation more as a path towards further integration also in the sector, rather than talking about permanent mode of differentiation or differentiated integration. Yes. So, and also considering in this spectrum, I'm talking about the energy, the COVID crisis is one of the challenges facing the future of Europe. Is it opportunity or the threat towards the energy transition? The voices has been diverse, speaking that it may be the rupture, the continuation of the transformation of the energy system to low carbon regime. For example, the heavy industry and the fossil-based industry still prioritizing the economic recovery to decarbonization, or does it provide the opportunity to take the lead to the transition path and this unique opportunity to use particularly the next generation fund to really accelerate the greening of the economies. I would stop here and also engage in the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donald, for this view from the ground, I would say. Now we have a full half hour for a discussion with the room, so raise your hand tell us who you are, tell us who you want to ask a question, don't make your statement too long. Olivier?
Yes, Olivier Costa from Sciences Po. Thank you all for your talks. Questions to Mr. Belet about the attitude or strategy of the European Parliament vis-à-vis this conference on the future of Europe. Maybe you should be cautious, we could understand that, but there is a feeling that the EP is trying to make the most of this conference to push its own agenda for the future. So is it the case, and could it be a threat for this kind of exercises in the future?
Thank you. Let's take 2 or 3 questions and people can brainstorm about that. Madame?
Yeah, my name is Lucia Mokra, I'm chair of TEPSA. And actually I have 2 questions. May I have? So the very first one is about, especially to Frank, about the concept of DI and the health union. You mentioned that right now it's more about like common, like a burden sharing, so it's rather not applicable. But from, I mean, like a mid-term strategy, you see the different levels, for example, of vaccination, there's different level of approach of using the advantages of so-called health union. So I wonder whether the health union is really like the option when we can find a consensus, or rather it would be again in some manner the differentiated approach applicable, because yeah, we have these discrepancies at all. And the second question is more like all of you. But it's connected with the DI also. It's not so much present as you mentioned in the discussion at the conference, and that's actually the question of DI. I would call it like flexibility, because when, for example, the Schengen had been announced or Schengen had been applied, and when the 10 countries joined the European Union in 2004, within the Schengen and within the open market, the common market, there had been, like stated the obstacles prolonged for 7 years, and we had been forced, for example, the Slovakia as the external border countries to really keep the border, the Schengen border with Ukraine closed, almost hermetically closed for a while, yeah. And right now, when we are, getting to the different crises, migration crisis, financial crisis, COVID crisis, and so on, we see the need of some kind of a flexibility. The borders are open. We are looking for the new labor forces. We are supporting the Ukraine as a strategic partner within the neighborhood policy. And right now, it's not so far. When the border had been closed. So it was in 2011 closed, and after 10 years we have really like a very open regime with that. So I wonder whether some kind of a flexibility in the EI concept is applicable here, and that's also actually the question related also to the energy security, because the opening border is also for that purpose opened at all. So that's.
Thank you so much. Let's take one more and we'll come back to other people later. So.
This is Sanchez from CEVIPOF in Barcelona. I've got, but it's directed to all of you, because I have mixed feelings towards the conference. On one hand, it seems that the results, the implementation of the results is going to be in hands of member states, so they may choose not to implement anything at all, which is distressful. But on the other hand, and this is happening already, we are selling the success of the conference because the process is kind of a success. My question would be, was it worth it to have the whole mobilization of citizens just to sell a process as a success?
Okay, thank you very much for those 3 very challenging questions. Maybe
excuse me, I have a question which goes hand in hand.
Okay, then if it's connected,
Sorry.
please go.
I don't want to take over. My name is Paul Schmidt from the Austrian Society for European Politics in Vienna. I also wanted to ask, I would not agree that the process of the conference on the future of Europe is already a success. It's nice to have, and important to have, meetings on weekends, on some of the weekends, with the different actors within the structure, but what we don't really have is the process in the member states. We don't really have the political ownership of the process in the member states by the governments, and I would like to ask you for a miracle. Can you inject more certainty into what to expect from this conference on the future of Europe? in the French presidency. I was quite surprised this morning that the colleague from the French Ministry of Finance almost en passant said 5 sentences about the conference on the future of Europe, while I thought, and I agree with the moderator, that it was actually the French president who triggered and started the whole thing. And there's a reason why this should stop on the 9th of May and conclude on the 9th of May during the French presidency. So what are we going to expect there as a result? And how do you measure the success? Easy questions.
Thank you for the question. Let's take a last one here. I've been very patient now.
Thank you. I have 3.
Please keep them short.
Can I be a bit positive first? I had an immense privilege of being in one of the panels 2 weeks ago. I was this impartial expert, and I was asked in the context of Western Balkan and Eastern neighborhood if we can have differentiated integration. But the question is actually on, follows up on Paul Schmidt's question, and it's directed to the other 2 panelists. I'm wondering if there is a qualitative difference between the 3 strains of the conference. If we can learn something from what is being discussed in the panels, the level and what is discussed on the multilingual platform, and then the national debates. And there would be maybe a question, perhaps to all of us, if the Slovak frustration with elite-driven process is unique to Slovakia or not. I would be very curious. I know it's not, but maybe if we could have a quick hand up where it's unique, where it's in other member states it's also a elite-driven process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to our speakers. Ivo?
Yes, thanks, Olivier. Yeah, we could. I think we don't have enough time to go into that of all these questions, but I'll be brief. First of all, I want to respond to a few issues that have been raised by my colleagues here, but I will concentrate on your issues. First of all, regarding European Parliament, I've been active also in that institution in my previous life, so you can't expect from me to say that the European Parliament would consider the European Parliament as a threat to this process. Apart from my personal opinion, but that is certainly not true. On the contrary, I think that the European Parliament is very engaged, extremely engaged in this process, and extremely committed, and very ambitious, and really an ally for those who want to make this conference into a success. Are they too ambitious? I don't know whether you can ever be too ambitious. Do they dominate the process? No, because it's a consensual process, meaning that all institutions and all the national parliaments have to be on board, otherwise you can't proceed, which is one of the key elements of the European Union when you want to make fundamental progress. So certainly not a threat, on the contrary. Regarding DI, your question on differentiated integration, and also what Frank mentioned before. The platform, of course, is open. It's not one of the main issues on the platform, but it's open even for participants from Zurich. There's no geo-blocking. There's no geo-blocking on the. It's of course about the future of the European Union, and it's made by citizens of the European Union with also observers of Western Balkans. But that doesn't mean when you're from the United States or even from Russia, but certainly from Zurich, you can come on the platform and you can say what you want to say if you don't misuse it. So there's no geo-blocking. So come on board and put your ideas also on differentiated integration on the platform and create the debate, put ideas, and it's open. But I have to say that citizens, when you observe the panels like tomorrow morning or this weekend, and you can follow them online, not the subgroups but the plenary sessions, you will see that they are really content oriented. So citizens are not that into the institutional issues, which I think is normal. Then I wouldn't say that they're not interested, but they're interested in content like on health across borders, or they're interested in do something about waste. You don't do enough, or do more about pesticides, all those cross-border environmental issues, or about climate, of course. And if this entails like treaty change, citizens say, okay, do it if it's necessary to solve that issue. And we from our side, Vice President Šuica has always said, and also the President von der Leyen said, This is not this is not the main objective of the conference to change the treaties. But if citizens come out, if the recommendation of the citizens mean that some institutional change will have to be changed, we're ready to look into it, of course, together with the other institutions, together with the council, with the national parliaments. Is the political ownership, Mr. Schmidt, only with the council, and does the council decide everything? It's a joint enterprise, and the three presidents have committed themselves. The president of the council, of the council presidency included, have committed to follow up on the recommendations. So political ownership is only, and the political engagement and the commitment is also with the council. Could they block it? Of course they could block it, but there is that, via the joint declaration, that explicit commitment also from council side. So yeah.
No, I was saying that the process doesn't happen in the member states. There's not enough happening. There's not enough political ownership of the governments.
I was coming to that. Yeah, of course. How shall I say? We can't make this into a success if national member states don't come on board. And there is certainly an issue there. There are several member states, France, not to name, and Germany, the Benelux countries, others, that are very active and have come in and are coming in with a lot of national events. Certainly France. We're in the heart of France. France is very active. Belgium, the Netherlands too, Germany too. They come in with a lot of national events. But that's not the case everywhere. I have to admit that. But the process is not finalized yet. We are entering one of the decisive phases of the process. So, answering to your question about media and awareness about media, is there a lack of awareness, a lack of interest with media? Of course there is. On the other hand, for the panel in Florence that will start tomorrow and go on all weekend, I've already referred to it, the last figure that I saw is that 57 journalists registered for the panel in Florence. That is a high number. We didn't have that number in the past, so that means we're entering in the process of media. I've been working in the media in the past. Media only come on board where they feel something substantial is happening there. It's going to happen, and this is the case now. We hope it will be the case. So they see that the recommendations are coming out, and they were entering in the upcoming months into a more decisive phase. And that's what you already feel in Florence. This media attention is a little bit increasing. Is this enough? No, but I'm rather optimistic about this. And what have I forgotten? Perhaps a lot, but I'll give the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Ivo. Perfect timing.
Yeah, so let me first come back to Lucia's question on the health union. Yeah, so I mean, this is an area where the European Union has not had any major competences so far. So I mean, looking back at the history of differentiated integration, this would be an area where this could help, yeah, to overcome the resistance of individual member states and establish a new policy. But that was, I mean, yes. On the other hand, I mean, the value added of the European Union would really be to create joint capacity in this area. So it's really, and that was also, let's say, the main purpose of, say, the joint acquisition and distribution of vaccines. Yeah, that you say overcome the obvious differences in the capacities of the member states when it comes to those issues. So that's why I think the way it has been introduced in the COVID pandemic has really been about, let's say, joint capacity building and sharing capacities across the member states. So it's a redistributive issue, and for that reason it works best if everyone is on board. Yeah? I mean, national governments have a very hard time to do anything about the unwillingness of citizens to get vaccinated, and I think the European Union will not do anything there. But I mean, that was the reason why I thought if it's about building, say, capacity in the health sector, then the European Union should really aim at uniform integration, because that would maximize it. If some member states are not part of it, on the margins, that that wouldn't be a big thing, but if some of the bigger member states would not be part of it, then it would again be self-defeating. So I mean, when it comes to the purpose of the conference, I think I see it mainly as an open agenda setting exercise. Yeah? So it's an invitation for anyone interested to get involved, put out ideas and discuss those ideas. But it's a kind of agenda setting exercise that is not binding in any way on any of the political actors. So what we will probably see is that all actors look into the results and pick whatever they like from the results, and then say, okay, we've always wanted that anyways, yeah, but now we can show that X% of the citizens, or in this panel, this was also supported. So it will, I mean, I think it will, a lot will depend on, let's say, a creative and authoritative drafting of the final reports, because this is where you really frame the results. I mean, we've seen that many years ago in the way that Giscard d'Estaing summarized the results of the convention, yeah, and created some kind of a push for certain issues that governments then had to deal with in one way or another, even though it took another intergovernmental conference to follow up. So I'm very curious to see whether this will happen again, yeah? That we will see some authoritative drafting of the final report that will put pressure, yeah, on the governments to act. Not formal, but informal, persuasive pressure. But otherwise, I think what we will also see is a lot of pick and choose, yeah, that all the political actors look at what they like and say, okay, this is supported by the citizens. So I'm very curious what will come out of it. It's hard to predict. It's an interesting experiment for a political scientist, definitely.
Thank you very much, Frank. Donald, wonderful.
Okay, thank you very much. I would also pick on what Lucia has mentioned in the question. And firstly, on the health union, what came to my mind, and even though it's not really the field of my expertise, but with the pressures also of the COVID pandemic and the voices of the reinforcements of the EU's competences in the health sector, the launch, or the particular launch of the European Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority, and it's more like a question also for the other, and also for the other, whether we can talk about more integration in the absence of the supranationalism by creating these new bodies that would, the competences would not be directly delegated from the member states into the Commission, but the power and the activities of the national governments would be vested in this new authority or this new institution. And the second, which touched upon the energy security, and it has been the topic of this very controversial topic within the integration of the energy policy. On one hand, with the Russian gas crisis and the supply crisis, the Commission has been able to exploit this in order to create as many frames as possible to increase their competencies, to frame it as the European problem that requires a European solution, in order to take any follow-up with also some legislation that improves the position and the competencies of the European Commission. On the other hand, simultaneously, the appeal on the security as such also instigated intergovernmental thinking, and that is in the hands of the member states and their sovereignty, also in line with the treaty and the function of the European Union. And in this case, particularly in the V4 countries, as on the whole European level, the renewable energy sources and the energy efficient sources were entering and were shifting the discourse of the energy security, that they're an integral part of the energy security, moderation of the amount and being energy efficiency in order to import less fossil fuels from third countries. in the V4 countries particularly, these still haven't penetrated in the discourse on the energy security, and the energy security remains still locked on the accessibility and affordability of the fossil fuels.
Thank you very much. Do we have other questions in the room? Yes?
I forgot to say my name before, Sabina Lange, EPA Maastricht, and we are hosting one of those last panels, and I can confirm that we are also receiving already journalist interest, and more positively local government interest, but maybe this is because it's Maastricht and it's the heart of Europe and so on, but you can see, well, the fear mounting that we will have to postpone or cancel because of the pandemic situation. But maybe a hopeful question for Mr. Belet. Do you see interest from others, like diplomats in Brussels, so in the engagements with the cabinet and with Ms. Šuica? Are there third parties interested? Are they following? Is this something that the world, in the Brussels bubble, at least perceives as worthy of attention among all other issues that are happening?
Thank you. Olivier?
Yes, from Mr. Belet again, very practical questions on the end of this conference, as far as you know. What would be the output? Will it be a report, a draft proposal for legislation? And also, when will it be the end? The French authorities let clear now that they are ready to continue after the ETH and not to close it in May. So what are your views?
Thank you, Olivier. Maybe I will abuse my position. I'm just wondering about there is a consensus in all institutions to say that major changes are needed now for the EU to regain legitimation if we look at the pledge of transparency and all that. And on the other hand, no one wants to talk about a treaty change. So we have a contradiction here. How is it possible to organize a massive change of the system the way it works without a treaty change? So I just would like to have your view on that. Maybe with a new political configuration in Germany, or maybe with the kind of, let's say, success of the Conference on the Future of Europe, can we expect a treaty change in the 5 years to come? So, Alexander?
Yes, hi, Alex Conway, IEA in Dublin, and we just cancelled our citizens panel last week, so I understand the pain. The question is about...
It's not cancelled, it's postponed.
Postponed, right. Sorry, first weekend in February. COVID permitting. Question is about differentiated integration, and more, I'd say Switzerland is probably the most differentiated integration region in Europe, with the EU probably at this point. I'm wondering, how does that fit in with the bits that are outside of the EU? I'm coming from an Irish perspective, we're looking at Northern Ireland. That's probably a very special, unique case, but we also have the common travel area. We have, mutual recognition of passports and voting rights and the like. How do you see the future differentiated integration in terms of how the EU relates with its immediate neighbours? Are we going to see a change in Switzerland, Norway, Russia, the Balkans, UK, North Africa, and so on? Be curious what the panel thinks about that.
Thank you. Maybe a last one, and then we'll give the floor back to our speakers. Okay, that's fine. So let's start again with you, Ivo.
Thanks, Olivier. Let me start with the outcome, because I forgot, I didn't have the time to respond to that question because it has been asked before. The outcome of the conference, what should come out, what will come out? That's of course the €1 million question. Yeah. And perhaps we shouldn't be answering it, certainly not on behalf of the Commission, even the Parliament, or the Council, or the National Parliament, or the National Government, or Parliaments, because that's exactly what we want to avoid. To preempt the outcome, that we should be reflecting about, where should we land, what should come out, and on health, or on climate, or on treaty change. No, this is exactly the nature, that's the essence of the whole process, is that citizens are at the heart, and we really want to cherish that fundamental element. Although not everyone and not all stakeholders will agree with this one, or have problems perhaps respecting that citizens are that the recommendations of the citizens should stay at the heart and have to stay at the heart of the process. Meaning, when those recommendations of the citizens, the first panel will come with their recommendations this weekend, and then hopefully Maastricht and Dublin and Netherlands will follow. Those recommendations have to stay at the heart of the plenary process, when citizens come together with elected representatives, civil society, etc. It's not in the heart. It's not the European. The Conference on the Future of Europe is not about citizens giving recommendations and then citizens, European elected representatives can say, okay, that was nice, and now we'll take over and we'll make something else out of it. No, citizens' recommendations have to be also at the end of the plenary process, and those recommendations can be refined and have to be debated and deliberated upon and discussed, but recommendations have to be what citizens recommend has to be at the end of the process and has to then end up in a final report, which will be handed over by the executive board of the conference to the three presidents of the three institutions, meaning Mrs. von der Leyen and her two colleagues. When will that be? What was scheduled was to land in March, but because of COVID, because of epidemiological situation, we will perhaps land in May. I don't know, the 9th of May. It's still to be decided. But that final report will be there, and then of course the follow-up by the three institutions, the institutional structure we have, will have to be responsible to follow up on that one. So, what did I forget? Treaty change. Treaty change. As I said, let me quote President von der Leyen, who explicitly also in several interventions in the plenary of the European Parliament and also in the State of the Union process, recalled and reminded us all of the fact that it's not to be excluded. It's not our starting point for this conference. Because you know that you would provoke some stakeholders, don't like it. But if citizens are asking for particular change or particular reforms, and that would entail treaty changes, so the Commission doesn't shy away from it. Perhaps other stakeholders will, but the Commission doesn't shy away from that, from the fact that perhaps those proposals or those initiatives have to be put on the table.
Thank you very much, Frank. Treaty change. Well, I don't think whatever is written in the German coalition government will be very important for treaty change, because this is not the stumbling block. It has never been the stumbling block for treaty change. I think if we look back, so the latest treaty change, Lisbon, that was before all of the crises that afflicted the European Union. And if you look back how the European Union has developed during these crises, in response to these crises, without treaty change, so that it shows that there's huge leeway to do things, even without changing the treaties. There's so much you can do in the way of secondary legislation. There's also a lot you can do with, say, intergovernmental arrangements. That's I was going to mention that too. There's many openings in the treaties for, say, elaborating on what's been said in the treaties through passerelle clauses. And I think when there is a consensual political will among the member states, they will find ways to do what they think they need to do without, let's say, a formal treaty change. And I think, given the current situation in the European Union, I don't see treaty change as, say, the most successful way of getting things done at the moment. Because it not only requires a consensus among all member states, it again opens up the whole issue of domestic ratifications with referendums that can be used for all kinds of purposes, and so I think the fact that we didn't have treaty change, or probably also won't have treaty change in the near future, is neither an excuse nor a major impediment to get things done that the European Union wants to get done. When it comes to the neighbors, yeah, I think this is what we call in the literature external differentiation. Yeah, so the selective participation of non-members in individual EU policies, here I think there has also been quite a change in how the European Union is using that. So this external differentiation has really taken a dynamic development in the 1990s, when the assumption was, okay, that all of these externally participating non-member states would at some point in time in the foreseeable future join the European Union. Yeah? So that was the mindset in the 1990s, and in that respect the European Union was quite open, generous. Brexit has changed that completely, I would say. And now, and I observe that from very close, yeah, because the Swiss government has learned, yeah, that all of these general exemptions for non-member states, this is not moving forward at the moment, and that the European Union is much more determined to streamline, institutionalize, narrow down, limit, what the kind of access and policy participation that non-member states have, and this has, in the end, also led to a breakdown in the negotiations. So I think the European Union has become less open, less flexible with regard to this differentiated integration. I mean, it does not preclude that, but it sets much stricter conditions, both institutionally, but also the famous term is balance of rights and obligations, right? That always comes up. While I think now the EU is looking much closer to the obligations of non-member states, and this, I think, has been very much. I mean, it's not exclusively driven by the UK withdrawal, but that has played an important role. And I think also that the fact that the enlargement policy is basically stuck also is a limit to external differentiation. I mean, as I said, in the past, this has been a major instrument for the European Union to facilitate the rapprochement of non-member states on their way to becoming members. Yeah? But if countries are already candidates for membership, are negotiating, I mean, there's not much more you can add. Yeah? And if these negotiations are not going forward for many reasons, yeah, external differentiation does not really help, unless the EU would say, okay, membership is not an option, we have to find an alternative kind of relationship. But neither the European Union nor the candidate countries are ready for that hard step, I would say.
Thank you very much, Frank. We're running a bit late, but no one needs the room, and there is nothing on the program, and there is nothing to do in Paris at night, so we can just wrap up with Donald.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be brief. So the treaty change 3.0. Just briefly, the Slovak Secretary General and Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that he wouldn't, that the Slovak Republic wouldn't be afraid to go with the treaty change. Nevertheless, as I already mentioned, the agenda and the discourse is monopolized, let's say, by the elites and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It doesn't seem that it's even on the table for the discussion with the public. Therefore, not going further to the Commission as some kind of proposal. Then the second, more the question to the external differentiation, and particularly Ireland. I would just mention the need for this some kind of special relation in the terms of the Brexit, in the context of the energy, and the building of the gas and electricity infrastructure and the electricity and gas market over the 25 years, there's still important electricity interconnection between Northern Ireland, the gas interconnection between the United Kingdom and Ireland, even though in the post-Brexit time, Ireland made a spectacular job in the diversification of their imports, but there's still in order to be the valid member of the electricity and gas market, it needs to be considered that the Brexit has also the implication on this part of the policy sector.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the attendants for all the questions and the remarks. Thank you for our three speakers for brilliant speeches and very precise answers.